Well, today I'm speaking on unconditional love. Unconditional love. And it is the focus of our third Sunday of Advent. And in this human realm, I think the most obvious expression of being spiritually awake is being love itself, being an embodiment that has a vibration of effortless love. You know, we all have a deep and profound capacity for love. And yet, when we watch our moments of the day, we can see how our capacity sometimes gets pulled into judgments, or it gets pulled over here into irritation. It gets pulled into egoic conditioning that keeps us from expressing love more fully. So it takes intention to awaken this capacity to love unconditionally, to love fully without holding back. It takes intention also to let it in and be less defended. Um, so, what helps us evolve our capacity to love? I think the first thing is realizing just how essential love is for our happiness. I like the analogy of love, comparing love to oxygen. If we don't have love, then our lives are in grave danger. If we can't breathe, if we don't have love, our lives are in danger. And just as our lungs are always yearning for oxygen, our heart always yearns to be open. Our heart yearns to give and receive loving kindness. And when we're not in that flow, when we're love deprived, we suffer. We suffer. And we often make others suffer when we're love deprived. So, part of why I love this time of year, and I'm looking at my windows, I wish I could show you. It is just snowing like a blizzard. But I love Christmas movies, and I love Christmas movies. They're kind of schmaltzy and sentimental, but they're all about love, and they're all about how love heals. And I was delighted last Sunday when Reverend Jim after service asked us all, "What's your favorite Christmas movie?" He loves Christmas movies too. And one of the most beautiful Christmas stories that's been made numerous times into a Christmas movie and a short story is The Gift of the Magi. And The Gift of the Magi is a story written by O. Henry. You may have read it. It was written back in 1906, I think. But it's about a couple, and they're very poor, and yet they love each other dearly, and they want to give each other something very special, something worthy of the great love that they feel for one another. And so it's Christmas Eve, and Della Young discovers she only has $1.87 to buy a present for her husband, Jim. And so she decides to go to the nearby shop, the hairdresser's shop, Madame Sofroni's shop, and offer her most valuable and prized possession, her gorgeous long hair. And the Madame buys her hair for $20. And so then Della uses the money to go and buy a platinum pocket watch chain for Jim, for his most prized possession, which is his precious grandfather's pocket watch. Well, when Jim comes home from work that evening, he stares at what's left of Della's hair, which she tried to salvage by putting little pin curls in it. And Della admits to him that she sold her hair to buy him a chain. Well, Jim then gives Della a present, which is a set of ornamental combs for her hair that Della had been admiring for months in a store window, and which she's now unable to use until her hair grows back out. Well, Della gives Jim the watch chain, and he tells her that he sold the watch to buy the combs. So, although Jim and Della are left with gifts that they cannot use, they realize how far they're willing to go to show their love for one another, and just really how priceless their love is. And I love this story, The Gift of the Magi, because the moral of the story is, that selflessness and love and being willing to sacrifice are the greatest gifts of all. Just that unconditional love, that incredible expression of love. And I know that I watch us as a community do many things for people we love in this community. And I watch us stretch ourselves. We all make sacrifices, and we are willing to forget our own comfort to bring comfort to another. And I celebrate every instance of those moments of love, seen and unseen. The teachings from Master Jesus focus so often on expanding our capacity for love. He goes into great detail about how we love and what love is. There's a lot on what love is in Scripture. In John chapter 4, verse 7, Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. To know God, we love. That's how we know God. We know God through loving, through stretching our hearts, through opening our hearts, through forgiving. Um, and so, part of growing in love is having our love expand beyond that one person or those three people or that immediate circle of family, and expand out beyond those that we're close to, and widen our circle to include all beings. Part of why it's easy to love those that we're close to is that we feel safe with them. We feel safe. I was thinking about, when I feel the most loving, and it's when I feel the most safe, the most relaxed, when we feel accepted, when we feel appreciated, when we feel just loved as we are, accepted as we are, we feel safe to express our love. I think of how we came into this world as babies. We're born so trusting, just completely wide open and completely unguarded. We all come in like that, and then along the way, as we grow up, we inevitably experience people who are out of touch with love and people who are suffering, who are themselves cut off from love and not feeling love. Maybe they didn't know much love in their life. And they treat us unlovingly and sometimes very hurtfully. And so we learn to protect ourselves. We learn to protect our tender heart so we can feel safe. And the barriers that we built for protection and for survival, they sometimes keep us from being open later in life and being able to fully experience love later in life. Rumi has this beautiful little poem he wrote about this. He said, Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. I love that. Our spiritual growth is learning to live with that innocent, open heart of a child, but with that wisdom that we gain from life, from living life, to understand, to be able to understand the suffering of others, and to understand that wounded people tend to wound. Wounded people tend to wound, and have compassion for that and realize they need help more than judgment. When Jesus said, Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven, he was saying, live with an open heart and love easily. And at the same time, be strong in your connection with God that is love, so that you have the eyes to see that so often people's bad behavior is a cry for love, is a cry for love. It was my mom's 86th birthday this past Thursday. And I was telling her how grateful that I was writing this talk, and I was contemplating how grateful I am for all the love that I felt in my childhood, because I had three moms. I had mom, little mom, and big mom. My mom, my grandmother, and my great grandmother all doting on me and my brother, and we felt like the most loved children on the planet. We were so loved, and because of that, I grew up knowing this was a safe world because of their love. And I think that that has helped me so much in keeping my heart open to this world, even when the world is reflecting back harshness, a harsher reality, even when the world is reflecting back a lack of love. I really see this spiritual journey as a journey from being an innocent child that's effortlessly loving and wide open to then becoming someone who learned how to protect themselves, to then getting back to living with an open heart, but with the wisdom of discovering that the source of love is ever present. We say we say the love of God enfolds us and we're held in love, but do we feel it? Do we let ourselves feel it? You know, to feel it is to be still and to be receptive to loving presence. I love that description of God as loving presence, a loving awareness also. That loving awareness is a living thing, and it's most felt when we're not telling a story in our mind of what's wrong with life, right? It's most felt when we're feeling gratitude. It's most felt when we're just listening within or just open and receptive. And if we can keep our connection to loving awareness open, then we're fortified. We're fortified to be in this world. And we're able to be present as love, even when people are lost in their conditioning around us. I myself am still learning how to love those who are not loving towards me. You know, I'm learning how to hold those who speak ill of me in my heart with a prayer that they discover greater love and they are able to heal their woundedness, and just hold a prayer that they can move from feeling ill will to having goodwill. Well, I think that's the best way to keep our hearts open, um, even when energies are challenging. And I believe if we never put people out of our hearts in the first place, then we don't have to do the work of forgiveness. You know, and sometimes we're not there yet. You know, we feel hurt and we decide not to give someone room in our heart. But then we can remember Rumi's advice when he says, your task is to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against love. Sounds like he's saying forgive. Sounds like he's saying remove all blockages and tear down all the walls in your heart. It reminds me of a story I want to share about two brothers. And I think I told this a few years ago, but it's such a beautiful story. It's worth repeating. Once upon a time, there were two brothers who lived on an adjoining farm, and they fell into conflict. And it was really the first serious rift in 40 years of farming side by side, sharing machinery, trading labor and goods without a hitch at all. It was this long collaboration, but it fell apart, and it began with a small misunderstanding that grew into a major difference and finally exploded into an exchange of bitter words, followed by weeks of silence. One morning, there was a knock on the older brother's door, and he opened it to find a man with a carpenter's toolbox. I'm looking for a few days' work, he said. Perhaps you would have a few small jobs here and there I could help with. Could I help you? Yes, yes, said the older brother. I do have a job for you. Look across the creek at that farm. That's my neighbor. In fact, it's my younger brother. Last week, there was a meadow between us, and he took his bulldozer to the river levee, and now there's a creek between us. Well, he may have done this to spite me, but I'll do him one better. See that pile of lumber by the barn? I want you to build me a fence, 8 foot high, 8 foot fence, so I won't need to see his place or his face anymore. The carpenter said, I think I understand the situation. Show me the nails and the pulse hole digger, and I'll be able to do a job that pleases you. The older brother had to go into town, so he helped the carpenter get the materials ready, and then he was off for the day. Well, the carpenter worked hard all day, measuring and sawing and nailing. And just about sunset, the farmer returned, and the carpenter had just finished his job. The farmer's eyes opened wide, and his jaw dropped when he saw there was no fence at all. It was not a fence, it was a bridge stretching from one side of the creek to the other. And it was a fine bridge, a fine piece of work with handrails and all. And the neighbor, his younger brother, was coming across with his hand outstretched. You are quite a fellow to build this bridge after all I've said and done. And the two brothers stood there at each end of the bridge, and then they met in the middle and they took each other's hand. And they turned to see the carpenter hoisting his toolbox on his shoulder. And they said, the big brother said, "No, wait, stay a few more days. I got other projects for you." And the carpenter said, "I'd love to stay on, but I have many more bridges to build." I love that story. I love that story because that's what love does. It builds bridges, not walls. And I feel like all of creation celebrates. The angels in the far corners of the universe celebrate when we choose love, when we choose forgiveness and healing and let go of blame and resentment. And sometimes, we forget how to build bridges and we need a sweet carpenter to come along, a little reminder to remind us that who we really are is love and what we came here for is love. I think it was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross that said um, there's three things that matter, how much love you were able to give, how much love you were able to receive, and how much love you were able to just share in this life. I don't, I don't know if that's three, but it's really true. Thinking of Franny, it's like I really see that she shared a lot of love in this life. She had a beautiful life, and it makes me review my life. Because life is precious and life is short, and we want to make sure that we love as much as possible, that we don't waste a moment. So it takes intentional work, to take a survey of our heart and see where we're at and see if there's any places where we're holding any little resentments and let those go. And I want to say a thing about having healthy boundaries, because being loving doesn't mean that we don't have healthy boundaries. It doesn't mean that we're just going to be a doormat or be a people pleaser. um, you know, we can actually have strong, healthy boundaries even while we have an open heart. And this is something you learn as you grow in wisdom, because our healthy boundaries are including ourselves in love. They're a way of also loving ourselves. And healthy boundaries can be letting people know we're not available for blame, and we're not available for disrespect, we're not available for negative projection, but we can still hold a space in our hearts for that person's awakening, for that person's healing. There's a beautiful book by James Odia that I recently got called Soul Awakening Practice. And there's a chapter that Michael Singer wrote in the book called Wounds Dissolving. And by wounds, he's speaking of blockages in the heart. And I want to share a little bit of what he wrote. He wrote, "Wounds feed on wounds. Over time, if not dissolved, wounds form a constellation of anger, hurt, and recrimination, which implode in self destruction or explode in violence to others. We live in a world of wound contagion." And you can see this. You can see this in families, you can see it in politics and our society. And you can see, especially in families, how wounds are passed down. Um, Mickey goes on to say wounds are often transmitted to others and can be sustained for generations, wreaking havoc in cycle after cycle of abuse and carnage. He says, but these cycles can be skillfully interrupted when there's a commitment to the kind of truth that allows people to express their deepest pain and dream a new story together. I love that. That these cycles of woundedness, that father passes to father and mother passes to son, mother to daughter, that these cycles can be skillfully interrupted when there's a commitment to truth and allowing each other to express our pain and really talk about it and put it out there on the table and let it go and dream a new story together. The holidays, maybe less so now because we're doing our holidays on Zoom, a lot of us, but they can be a time when we get back in touch with our families and we see how old wounds are just right there. All you have to do is just press in the wrong place where that open wound is, and things come up that you see need healing. But these cycles can be skillfully interrupted. I really love meditating on that. How do we skillfully interrupt these wounds that have been handed down and heal them once and for all? I believe it takes being interested in healing. It takes wanting to be close more than being right. And it requires learning to communicate without blame. And it also requires being willing to acknowledge and express our deepest pain and hear someone else's pain without needing to fix it, without needing to defend it, just being present with it, just being present. Mickey writes, forgiveness has the power to dissolve wounds. It is the bridge to reconciliation and new life. It releases attachment to being the injured part. Forgiveness refuses to be dominated by perpetual resentment. Forgiveness. Such a big part of love, such a big part of being able to experience infinite love. So, as we move through these days of Advent, I invite you to practice living with a forgiving heart, living with a forgiving and open heart, and realize that no one is an enemy. And when people wound, it's because they're wounded and they need our help much more than they need our judgment. I found some statements to choose to think if somebody acts in a difficult way or in a harsh way. I love these statements. Here's a few suggestions. He's probably having a bad day. I can understand how she might feel that way. I can let that go. I can understand and forgive him for that. I'm doing the best I can. She's doing the best she can. I choose to send love instead. I'll leave it up to God. Delete that thought and peace, peace, peace. Om Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. So, in closing, let us breathe in love like we breathe in oxygen and offer love like the trees offer oxygen. Let us choose to tear down walls wherever we might have built them up and build bridges in this season of Advent. May we live every day with an open, happy heart like a child on Christmas morning. I love you all. Thank you all. God bless you.
Mm. Amen.
Thank you, Kathy.